Okay. Now,
Hi, good morning. This is Rabbi Ira Ebbin from Congregation Oav Shalom in Merrick, Long Island. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Rabbi Howard Goldsmith from Westchester, who's going to introduce himself. And we're here with sacred text, left to right, nature versus nurture. And Howie, I'm going to hand over the floor to you.
great. I am Rabbi Howard Goldsmith from Congregation Emmanuel of Westchester. And Ira, you picked a great text this week that gets into the question of, exactly as we said, nature versus nurture. So I'm trying a way to share this text with everybody. Let's see if it works. There we go. So I would like to read this text, and then we can start the conversation. Okay. This is the Rashi on Genesis 25:22, and it's when Rebecca is having a difficult pregnancy, and the children are struggling inside her stomach. And it says, and the children struggled. You must admit that this verse calls for a midrashic interpretation, since it leaves unexplained what this struggling was about. And it states that she exclaimed, "If it be so, wherefore did I desire this?" i.e., she asked whether this was the normal course of childbearing, feeling that something extraordinary was happening. Our rabbis explain that the word v'yitrotzutu has the meaning of running, moving quickly. Whenever she passed by the doors of the Torah, i.e., the schools of Shem and Eber, Jacob moved convulsively in his efforts to come to birth. But whenever she passed by the gate of the pagan temple, Esau moved convulsively in his efforts to come to birth. That's from Genesis Rabbah. Another explanation is they struggled with one another and quarreled as to how they should divide the two worlds as their inheritance. That is from Yalkut Shmoni. So we have a pretty deep text there, and let's start talking about it.
Okay, I guess that's my cue. I mean, obviously, this happens to be Parshat Toldot is actually my favorite portion. There's just so much dynamics beyond and ideas behind what here. One of them you have is Vayitro to do Abanim B'Kirba. This idea that she's wrestling with this internally, and we have the first question, of course, is nature versus nurture. How do we understand that Jacob was inclined to go to the to study halls, and Esav was inclined to go to the idolatrous practice or the pagan practice, etc. And this was in utero. So this is their destiny. If this is something that's happening internally while she's pregnant, it's a real question, and it's something that Rashi, quoting this midrash, says that is the interpretation, at least, or that he's proposing for this verse. So how do we get there?
Well, I think that humans can't help but wonder how much of our lives are predetermined, how much of our character is predestined, how much can we shape who we are and what we're going to become. The suggestion from this midrashic interpretation that Rashi cites, that's from Bereshit Rabbah, suggests that indeed who we are in utero is who we will ultimately become. You know, each Jacob and Esau are both painted with the brushes that will color them for their whole lives. Jacob is the man committed to God, and study. We can get into the question of how there could be issue both back then and another time. Whereas Esau is attracted to things that have nothing to do with God, pagan temples and the worldly pursuits that they are interested in. I frankly find it a little troubling on the one hand, and at the same time, fascinating that, over 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, people were having the same questions that we ask today about how much of who we are is predetermined at birth, and how much of it we can shape ourselves.
So I think the midrash is coming to sort of help answer a question that's a bigger question, which is, we're going to turn the page in a moment, and we're going to see that Esav goes one way and Jacob goes another way. And the question is that how could that be if they grew up in this nice Jewish home with Isaac and Rebecca, and they had Shabbos every week, and they family time, and they watch the Brady Bunch or whatever it is. Like, how could that be that they have such diverting outcomes if they grew up in the same home? Part of this also is the Midrash structures in general, which is everything's very linear. There are good guys and there are bad guys. And so they like to keep it that way. And obviously there are different interpretations of how we understand who Esav is, whether he's the antagonist or the victim. The Midrash likes to very much consistently keep him as the antagonist, as the bad guy, the one in the black hat, and Jacob is the one in the white hat and the good guy. And so they want to keep that even from the beginning, from the time, from utero.
I don't think that tendency is old. I think that is also a very contemporary tendency, perhaps more so today than before.
So who's the good guy and the bad guy in our group here?
Well, I think in the text here,
I'm talking about between the two of us.
Right. I guess it depends if it's my congregants or your congregants.
There you go.
But we always have a tendency to want to make things simple, black and white, good guys and bad guys, axis of evil or our allies. Of course, when we stop to reflect on the world, we know that it's mostly grays. There's very few black or whites. But I think the dichotomy is helpful anyway, because it calls our attention. It calls our attention to our own selves, our own dispositions, and how much of our actions we take without thinking, acting from a place completely of nature and who we are naturally, and how much of our actions we take from a sense of nurture, how we nurture ourselves, how we allow the teachings of Torah, our good inclination to take over.
So I actually think that what you're saying really jives with the text itself. When we took one verse and quoted the Rashi and the Midrash on it, but the truth is that entire scene is Rebecca really wrestling with herself. When she's introduced, it tells us that Isaac is it tells us, Eila Toldot Yitzchak, Yitzchak ben Abraham, Abraham Olidet Yitzchak, Yitzchak is the son of Abraham, and Rebecca is the daughter of Bethuel, the sister of Lavan. And I think that she's wrestling with this new role that she has, whether or not she is the matriarch of the Jewish people, the daughter-in-law of Abraham and Sarah, while at the same time she grew up on the other side of the tracks and is the sister of Lavan and the daughter of Bethuel. And I think this wrestling, this is her own wrestling. And she says, if this is so, who am I? Am I the daughter-in-law of Sarah, or am I the sister of Lavan? And I think this is something that she's wrestling with. What is my nature and what is my nurture? And I think in the context, it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I think it does make a lot of sense. I'm not sure how successful that she is at wrestling with this question, though, because what she goes on to do is to nurture the nature of Jacob and Esau. She so clearly favors Jacob throughout the story and works hard to assure the destiny that God prophesies, that she learns from God that the older will serve the younger. And she does everything in her power to make that come to be. And I think in a lot of ways, she stunts both of their growth by pursuing this so single-mindedly instead of wondering, how can I raise up both boys?
So actually, years ago, I wrote an article called "Poor Parenting" from Parshat Toldot, and it takes the dysfunction of the family of Isaac and Rebecca, who incidentally never speak except she at the end of the portion she yells at him and says, if Jacob marries a local girl, then why am I living? And and otherwise they don't really talk. If she had this prophecy. And she got received this from somewhere. Why didn't she tell the father? Why didn't she discuss this? At some point over the last 100 years, they should have said, you know what? I'm a little concerned about Esav. I'm not sure what kind of girl he's going to marry. I'm not sure of a number of things. So there's very little communication here. They're very peculiar figures. I think part of that, by the way, is that she doesn't feel comfortable sharing these things. She's not comfortable knowing that Yitzchak is this great righteous person, and she comes from the other side of the track. So she has a lot of identity issues and is uncomfortable with who she is. and therefore doesn't share this with her, with the father.
You know, Ira, I think it's so interesting your focus on Rebecca, because it gets to as you're pointing out, it gets to the question of a parent's role in the development of their children. Look, we committed to keeping today's conversation to 10 minutes. We have about 30 seconds left by my count. So I want to give each of us the chance to say a closing word or two. I'll go first, and then you can get the last word in. My feeling from this is that it calls to mind the importance of both our disposition and what we do with it. Our disposition, I believe, is natural. And I think the text really highlights that. It says, we come out into this world a certain way. But I think that Jewish tradition goes on to teach us that each of us needs to take that disposition and work with what we have to constantly improve ourselves and the world around us. Without the belief that we can do that, much of our most sacred teachings fall away.
So I'm going to reinforce that. I'm hoping to argue with you, but I'm going to reinforce that as well. Next week we'll try to argue more. I think very much that the text spends a lot of time showing distinctions between Jacob and Esau. Their physical distinctions, their behavioral distinctions, the careers that they go through, and that it's clear that the text is showing the difference between the two and how they diverge. But that doesn't mean that Esau couldn't have been amazing, couldn't have been great. In fact, it's possible that Isaac saw the potential in Esau, which is why he was so enamored with him as the leader of the future of the Jewish people. A lot of physical character traits that Isaac sees and that the text describes is actually the same description that they find of King David HaMelech. He's red. He's a military man, a man of the field, etc. Esau could have been the Mashiach. He could have been King David. There are genetic dispositions. It's who we are, right? I'm never going to be able to slam dunk a basketball, although I'm still trying, right?
Maybe on the hoop behind you.
Yeah, that's why I have it, by the way. They said it's for my son, but it's really for me, right? We have a slam dunk contest. But we take what we have and we can use it and channel it to the positive. And I think that's what the rabbis are trying to convey in this text.
Ken Yehi Ratzon. May that be God's will.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.
Good job, Howie.
Okay, great to chat with you, Ira.
All right, we'll see you next week.